In writing The Fallen Star, Claudia Gray took a lot of inspiration from disaster films, and in particular, 1972's The Poseidon Adventure. Like that two-titular cruise ship, the Starlight Beacon goes through the ringer in this novel, and not all of our heroes make it out alive in the end. The Fallen Star made it to number 13 on the New York Times bestseller list for the week of January 23rd, 2022. So, a brief summary. Hanging like a jewel in the outer rim, the Starlight Beacon is the greatest of the High Republic's great feats. And it currently shelters numerous refugees fleeing Nile attacks. But little do they know that civilians and Jedi alike will have no time to recuperate and recover from their losses. For Marchion Ro, the true mastermind of the Nile, has planned his most daring attack yet that aims to snuff out the very light of the Jedi. So first, the good. In keeping with a disaster movie, I felt like the pace here was very good. It moved quickly even from the beginning, but obviously once tragedy struck, it just kept moving up a notch as things got more tense and the situation got more dire and the way out for our heroes looked more and more unlikely. The chapters felt pretty short, which made me keep turning the pages, and we got to be in the head of both Jedi and civilians, heroes, villains, and people of dubious morality all the same. So I felt like we got a good sense of what was going on all sides at all times. The Fallen Star saw the return of characters we had seen in the adult novels, like Bell Zettifer, Buryaga the Wookiee and his master Nib Assek, Stellan Gios, Elzar Mann, and of course, the big bad Marchion Ro. But we also saw the return of characters who had appeared in young adult novels, like Affie Hollow in the crew of the vessel, Chauncey Yarrow, Syl's mother from Out of the Shadows, and the former Nile girl Nan. But then there also are some characters who are new to the Fallen Star, and their fates affected me differently depending on how long I'd known them for and how many books they'd appeared in, but more on that later. Again, I really love Bell. I love everything he's going through, even if it is tough. He's had a really hard past 2 or more years from Light of the Jedi until now, but he's really shown the kind of Jedi he'll be, a strong, compassionate one. I liked Buryaga the Wookiee, who's kind and empathetic, and I liked getting to see more of Elzar and Stellan's characters, especially Stellan, because I found him very rigid in The Rising Storm, but he comes to a lot of realizations here in The Fallen Star that make him more human, more fallible, and consequently more interesting to read about. I also liked how tightly focused The Fallen Star was on the disaster at the Starlight Beacon. I felt like in Light of the Jedi and The Rising Storm, sometimes the story felt too broad, that we were dealing with too many characters, too many events. And while there weren't too many plot lines and characters to get a handle on, I did definitely have favorites that I preferred to return to. And in The Fallen Star, while we cut away at times to the Chancellor on Coruscant or Marchion Ro on his vessel, for the most part, it is tightly focused on the Jedi and civilians and saboteurs aboard the Starlight Beacon and what they are doing. And when we cut away to those other viewpoints, it's more to give us an idea of what the galaxy at large thinks about the situation than introducing other plot events. And finally, Gray was not afraid to go dark. This is definitely the Empire Strikes Back of the High Republic series thus far. It's, yes, a disaster film. Not everyone who starts out the novel makes it out in the end. And for the most part, I really appreciated her willingness to sacrifice anyone and everyone along the way. It made what they were facing feel very realistic, because sometimes I feel in disaster films you really wonder, would all these people have been able to get out of this situation? I mean, surely more of them would have been eaten by sharks or drowned or fallen off the skyscraper. And for the most part, I felt like the people that survived here survived because of the quick thinking and the innovation and the, heroic sacrifice of the others around them. However, I did also, as usual, have some mez here. And my first was that if you go into the Fallen Star expecting resolution of a lot of the things that were introduced, especially at the end of The Rising Storm, you're not going to get any here. And I'm not really sure where we're going to get resolution for those things, like what is the Great Leveler, what's going on with Marchion Ro and the Nile and this vendetta against the Jedi. I think that Charles Soule is coming out with some sort of mini-series about the history of the Ro family, which might answer some of those questions. But the next phase of the High Republic series is set 150 years prior to Light of the Jedi, the prequel to Phase 1's original trilogy, I guess. And I'm not sure how we're going to get answers for some of these things if we're jumping back in time. Like, are we going to have to wait until Phase 3 to learn more? In a similar way, we do not see all the events that occur on board the Starlight Beacon. In particular, Avar Kriss comes back from her crusade against the Nile just when tragedy strikes. We briefly hear that she's able to board the top portion of the station, but then we don't hear anything else until Elzar Mann reunites with her at the end. And this is intentional. Claudia Gray and Cavan Scott worked closely because her novel and his comic series for the High Republic comics take place during the same span of time. So what's happening with Avar will be covered in Scott's comics. But I did find that very frustrating because I haven't been able to read any of the comics yet. I'm hoping that I'll finally find some time to track down at least the adult High Republic comics and get caught up. But knowing that an entire chunk of what happens here is relegated to the comics really annoys me, because it seems difficult for casual fans or for fans who only want to read the novels to 100% know what's going on without having to consume all these other different kinds of media. Like, I thought it was really cool that characters from the young adult novels showed up here, and you sort of can get a grasp on who they are, but you know who they are better if you read those young adult novels, and it just seems needlessly complicated to me, a way of making people track down every piece of media, like a money-grabbing plan, but not maybe the plan that's in the best interest of readers. I know, I'm just really mad that I have to read the comics, okay? And finally, I think the fate of various characters, how hard it hits you emotionally, will depend on how much time you've spent with them and how familiar you are. A number of Jedi die, and for the most part, I was just sort of like, that's tough, buddy, because they were minor characters in previous books, or in one instance, they were a character that we had never met before, and it's sad to see their deaths, but I also don't really know them, so it doesn't hit me the same as it would someone whom I followed for multiple books who I've seen grow and progress. So yeah, of the Jedi deaths, I think the ones that hit me hardest was one that is very much a case of they seem to be dead, but it's missing presumed dead, and maybe they will reappear, but it's left ambiguous. And then one character who did, I can only describe as what Lorana Ginsler and Thras did at the end of Outbound Flight by Timothy Zahn, where it's come down to the wire. They can save people at the cost of their own life, and they choose to sacrifice themselves for the greater good, for the others who will die if they don't make a decision. That just, I don't know if it's me just really liking that moment in Outbound Flight, but that hit me really hard. A good end, a sad end. I'm really sad to see that character go, but what a way to go. So yeah, the deaths. I was all over the place. Some of them I felt were so good. Some of them just, I didn't feel anything. One character did have a miraculous save, and at first I was a little annoyed, but as I thought about it further, it was a character who had proven that they liked old tech, old stuff, so the explanation worked even if initially I was a little grouchy about it. So in short, if you enjoy disaster stories, a few people facing terrible odds to save those around them, you'll probably enjoy The Fallen Star, although I'm not sure enjoy is the right word when you have such a huge death count at the end. Am I still frustrated that seems like key events are being relegated to the comics? Yes. Am I a little frustrated that some of the questions that were raised at the end of the previous adult novel have still not been answered? Yes. But what I think Claudia Gray is really good at is digging into characters' inner selves, and there was some really good work here with Bell Zettifer and Stellan Gios and Elzar Mann and other characters too, like Affy and the other civilians on board. The last chapter opened up the possibility that there were other things going on Corellia and other worlds that I assume we'll see in the young adult and middle grade novels and in the manga and in the comics. And I'm interested too to see what the next phase has to bring, especially being set so far in the past before these events. And again, there is a kid-friendly overview of the Starlight Beacon disaster called The Battle for Starlight, featuring just a good Wookiee boy, and again, a lot of stickers. So, if you are a kid, why are you watching this? But if you have kids, maybe check that one out too. Two, we learn a development in here that Jira Staros, Avon Staros' mother, she's a Republic senator. In the previous young adult novel, Out of the Shadows, we definitely got the sense that she was morally dubious. But here we learn that apparently she's been working for Marchion Ro and carrying on a romantic relationship with him. And I just want to know, when did that happen? Did that happen in the comics? Because the